Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Schrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Hello, and welcome to both of you.
Hey, Tanya.
Hi, Tanya. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and I hope everyone's staying dry this week.
Trying.
Staying inside anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely an inside hot chocolate kind of week.
Definitely soup weather for sure.
Oh, soup. The best. Well, Thad, would you like to fill us in on what's coming to this week's cover story?
Yeah, this week we have a great story by Elaine Weinreb, a regular freelancer of ours, looking into some trouble on Horse Mountain that I had to say before she brought it to my attention was just nowhere near my radar. So have you ever been up to Horse Mountain, Tanya?
No, but I was clued into the fact that this went on up there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was glad that somebody was highlighting it because it definitely sounded a little Wild West when it was mentioned to me.
Very much sounds like a Wild West situation. So yeah, this is Horse Mountain, which is on State Route 299, about 25 miles east of Blue Lake. It's the first summit that you go over heading east to Willow Creek, and there's a small access road there off of 299 that leads up to the peak of Horse Mountain, and there's some communications towers up there, and but mostly it's kind of known as a really popular place for outdoor recreation. And so when I moved up here a gazillion years ago, my introduction was going up there to play in the snow. And I went up with a couple friends and snowboarded down the mountain and then had to hike back up and did that a couple times and said, I don't need to do this ever again. And so I have not been back. But it's supposed to be a beautiful hiking spot. And then, in non-winter months when it's not covered in snow, there's, beautiful wildflowers and some really unique plant life that's up there that because of its kind of unique soils and location that don't grow other places. And so it's actually labeled a botanical reserve. It's really popular with folks from like the Native Plant Society and, as I said, just a whole host of outdoor recreation stuff, from mountain biking to mountain climbing to hiking and stuff. And so all of that I knew about, but what I didn't know about is it's also home to a couple makeshift shooting ranges, and where people like to go and set up makeshift targets and take target practice. What I also didn't know, what I learned from Elaine's reporting, is that this is entirely legal. Apparently it's totally legal to go on any federal land, so any BLM land or Forest Service land, except some very specific places where there's carve-outs, and do target shooting. The issue with Horse Mountain, as some folks might have guessed already, is that this is a pretty small place. It's about 1 square mile that is home to a lot of different popular activities, including shooting. And shooting is generally not something that you want to do around hikers or botanists or other things like that. And there's also a lot of questions, as Elaine documents really clearly, about kind of how responsibly this target shooting is being done up there. There's both lots of issues with folks taking, like old TV sets and beer bottles and beer cans and things to shoot at up there and then just leaving the remnants, which is, obviously has environmental impacts and just kind of aesthetic impacts for people who want to use the property for other things. But then there's also lots of questions about whether people are shooting safely, and whether people are using the appropriate backdrops, steel backdrops behind their targets to make sure that stray bullets aren't flying everywhere. And if they are really only shooting, into these quarries that are rock quarries up there that do provide some protection in the backdrop. Elaine's reporting really documents some pretty harrowing sounding close calls. People, just happily walking through a forest and rounding a corner to hear kind of bullets whizzing past their heads. To some folks who set up an equestrian trail up there and then quickly kind of abandoned it because they realized they were riding into shooting ranges that felt very unsafe. And so Elaine documented how the North Coast chapter of the California Native Plant Society has been writing letters to Six Rivers National Forest going back about 10 years now, kind of raising the alarm about this issue. And, over those 10 years, it seems that the Horse Mountain has become more popular, both for all these outdoor recreation uses, but then also that target shooting there has become more popular. One of the sources in the story kind of says that target shooting is one of those sports or hobbies that seems to kind of ebb and flow as years go by. And currently we're just in an uptick where a lot of people seem to be interested in going up there and shooting their guns. So there's, just kind of a big question of whether these uses can be done compatibly and safely, or whether some kind of intervention is needed.
Well, it's definitely not one of the things that you're hoping to incorporate in your skill set when you're trying to snowboard, I would imagine, is dodging shotgun rounds.
I'm very grateful to Elaine for bringing this to our attention, if only because now I know if I go up there and a bullet whizzes by me, it's not personal, at least.
Indeed. And I guess I should say also why it is such a popular site for target shooting. There are kind of limited opportunities for target shooting up here on the North Coast. There are some gun ranges within, kind of driving an hour's drive of Horse Mountain. But all of them, either require membership, which requires fees, or if they are open to the general public, they require kind of day use fees, and they're also only open in limited hours. Some of them require like National Rifle Association membership in order to use the facilities for insurance reasons, which some people are reticent to do. But I think the biggest factor seems is that this is just a free place to go shoot, and it's also one that's really easily accessible. That it's basically someplace you can drive, get out of your car, walk a couple feet, and set up your targets and start shooting.
Well, and it was also very surprising that this is completely illegal activity, and if that's the case, I mean, that's fine. But I definitely am encouraged by the fact that they're trying to think of ways to do it more safely. Because I can't imagine 6 different groups shooting in 6 different directions is going to be safe for anybody involved.
Right. And I guess I should make really clear that while it is legal to target shoot in this location or on federal land, it is not legal to do so, wantonly or with disregard for the safety of the people around you. It is illegal use, but there are restrictions on that. And, and I should also say that one of the reasons the Forest Service has been kind of reticent to kind of crack down on this activity is that, it is actually mandated by federal law to kind of maintain these spaces for as many recreational uses as possible, explicitly including shooting. So it is kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. And there's some suggestions in the story about maybe just increased signage and making sure that users of all types of this area are aware of these various uses. And so maybe they are a little bit more wary when turning a corner around a rock quarry, or at least not alarmed when they hear gunfire in the distance.
Excellent. Thad, do you have any final thoughts on this story before we move forward?
Just that I think it's a good PSA, if nothing else, to let people know that these various uses are there, and honestly to let target shooters know too that there are some very real concerns about their activity up there. So if nothing else, maybe they can be a little bit more responsible in in their use and making sure that everybody feels safe up there.
Well, thanks for that story, and I encourage everybody to pick up this week's North Coast Journal and read the entire article for themselves, as well as some of the news stories that we're also highlighting here. Would you like to go over those with us, Thad?
Yeah, definitely. We have a packed issue this week, so I'll keep it short. But we have two other stories that we've been covering for some time now that we're just kind of updating, which we'll be returning to in the near future. So you guys will be hearing more about those. But one is an update on the Travis Schneider project on Walker Point Road, south of Bayside. Local developer, as most people I'm sure know, violated all kinds of conditions of his permit and building his family mansion out there, a 20,000-foot structure overlooking the Face Slough wildlife area. And basically, the update is that the Coastal Commission has appealed the deal struck between Schneider and the county and local area tribes to kind of put this whole thing behind him and them and tear down the structure and kind of restore that property to its natural grade. And the Coastal Commission has some concerns about the plans approved by the county, whether they're specific enough and binding enough. And so that project is now going to go for a full hearing before the California Coastal Commission, which now has full discretion to kind of deal with Schneider and his permit violations as it sees fit. So that deal struck back, I don't know, late last year or mid last year. Regarding this property was really struck between these parties, especially from Mr. Schneider, in an effort to keep this out of the Coastal Commission's purview. So I imagine the County of Humboldt and Mr. Schneider feel a bit daunted by this being taken up by the Coastal Commission, which really, since long before Schneider even owned this property, has raised concerns about its use and plans to subdivide it and develop it.
Excellent.
So that's one, and then and that'll be heading for a hearing sometime in the coming months. They anticipate definitely before July. So we'll report back on that. And then the other story that we're updating is on Stephen Dinsmore, who folks might remember did a bunch of reporting on late last year. He was a man from Eureka who was convicted back in 2006 of assaulting a peace officer with a firearm and sentenced to almost 30 years in state prison. Was served 17 years of that prison sentence, and then basically made the argument to a Humboldt County Superior Court judge, both that he had been rehabilitated in his time in custody, that he'd earned his GED, taken a bunch of courses, kind of self-improvement courses, and victim impact courses and things like that, and petitioned for his release, saying that he felt a new law that struck some of the sentencing enhancements that of the type that he had been sentenced with. Should allow him, to have those stricken on his sentence too. Judge agreed. Ultimately, that decision was overturned by an appellate court, and so we had this unique situation where Stephen was released from state custody, went about kind of living his life for 15 months, trying to kind of reestablish himself, got a job with Caltrans, did a bunch of other stuff, was released from state parole, only to have that decision overturned and the judge kind of forced to remand him back to custody. And so since August, he's been in the Humboldt County Jail in kind of a legal limbo, waiting to try to figure out what comes next. In the midst of all this, actually, due to the efforts of his appellate attorney, the state legislature passed a law that AB 600, which went into effect January 1st, and allowed essentially his sentencing judge to recall and resentence him at his own discretion. And so that's what John Feeney did this week, and determined that the new law allowed him basically to strike a 10-year sentencing enhancement that Mr. Dinsmore had. So he was on Monday was released from Humboldt County Jail and is now a free man, resuming kind of the life he'd had underway in August when he was put back in custody.
Thank you for those updates, and thank all the journalists for the articles. Well, let's turn to Jennifer and find out what's happening on the Arts and Features beat this week.
I have good news. Ice cream news.
Love it.
I finally got myself down to Lolita, to the Jersey Scoops, which, by the way, Jersey as in the cow, not as in the Garden State. The Jersey Scoops ice cream shop on Main Street in Lolita. You can't miss it. I took my kid down there and went and got some ice cream. And later in the week, I was able to talk to one of the owners. So you may recall the Foggy Bottom Boys in Ferndale, who have eggs, dairy, meat, etc., all this wonderful stuff, including some very nice wool. Knitters out there, they make very nice wool. So this is Thomas and Cody Nicholson Stratton. And Cody comes from a nearly 100-year-old dairy farm family. Their farm has been there, I think he said it's going to be 100 years in 2025. And they send their milk out all over the place. And at some point, they were like, well, how do we, as they put it in business school, add value to the product? So like you're selling your milk everywhere for a certain price, but you could sell the milk in a different form, like cheese or ice cream for a little bit more and kind of expand your product line. But it's tricky. To do that, well, in years past, it was harder to do that because, equipment and facilities and space and all that stuff to make ice cream was big, it was bulky, it was difficult. But smaller batches now can be done and, done locally. So the cool thing when I talked to Thomas about it was, to me, the cool thing is that the ice cream is made in less than a day. And what I mean by made, I mean taken from a cow, milked, and then moved over to the ice cream shop and put into a machine and frozen and flavored and all that stuff. And it is ice cream by noon. I love that. Do I want to milk the cows? I do not, but I am very excited at the freshness of the ice cream. So they do that once or twice a week, and they crank out all of these cool flavors. They don't do a crazy variety. We're not doing 31 flavors. There's usually about 8, and then the vanilla and chocolate soft serve. Let's talk about soft serve for a moment. Are you a soft serve person?
Always.
Okay, what people don't understand. Are you ready for hard ice cream opinions?
We're going to get blowback.
Watch this be the thing that finally gets me fired.
It's a passionate topic.
Soft serve is the best ice cream. I say that, well, it's a tie. Soft serve custard to me is the best ice cream of them all. A little egg yolk and that soft serve temperature, which is just barely hanging on to being frozen in cone form. And then you lick it and it just melts. And whatever fat is in there, which is usually a little bit less, like gelato and soft serve tend to have a little less fat than like ice cream. It just kind of spreads on your tongue and you taste it more. You know how sometimes when you eat a piece of chocolate that's like been in the refrigerator and you kind of can't taste the chocolate, you just sort of feel the texture? It's because the fat is not warm enough. Soft serve ice cream. The bummer is that most of the time, soft serve ice cream has kind of garbagey ingredients. Not garbagey like, oh, it's so bad for you, but just none of it's fresh. A lot of it is artificial, and it's just not that bam pow of homemade ice cream. And notice I don't care about nutrition. But when you have soft serve ice cream that's made from fresh milk and, kind of fewer ingredients to crowd the field of flavor, the vanilla and the chocolate are really nice. They're light. They're not super dense. Like everything is, richness. But do you remember how good Yoo-hoo was? Do they even still make Yoo-hoo? Is Yoo-hoo still around? That kind of light chocolate milk flavor, like lunchtime, you're so hungry, you get your little carton of chocolate milk and the first sip of chocolate milk flavor. That's what you're looking for in the cone, in a soft serve cone for me. Mind you, their scoopable ice cream is also not terribly frozen. And for an ice cream that only comes in around 10% milk fat, according to Thomas, which I was like, you lying. But in fact, he stood by it. It also has that wonderful like fat spread on your tongue. And they don't even have to homogenize the milk because it doesn't sit long enough to separate. It goes from cow to cone fairly quickly. And, they do some lovely flavors, some fun flavors like Danish butter cookie. I know, right? Imagine it's the butter cookie tin, but instead of sewing needles, it's ice cream. And then they have like a cinnamon, which I really liked. I was first like, I don't know about crossing the streams between cinnamon and mint, but in fact, it was delightful and very holiday-ish. They also make Oreo cookie sandwiches, which you can get for like $7 for like half a dozen. You know, okay, Oreos, another hot take. Oreos have too many flavors. We've gone wild.
Agreed.
Yeah, we've gone too far. But when it comes to making a plain vanilla or chocolate ice cream sandwich, this is where the many flavors of Oreos find their purpose. And it's a cool little shop. Like they make, grilled cheese sandwiches and other things. But I think what is fun about it is that it's, in Lolita, it's this tiny little strip of shops, like 8 shops, most of which are, I think, maybe half of them are full, half of them are empty. And there's the post office and there's the market. And then there's the ice cream shop. And people kind of go and sit over by the old train tracks or sit in the shop at the little cafe tables. And it's a very cute shop. And they have every locally made product you can think of. Some of them which use their dairy's milk, like the Hum Yum Caramel, uses their milk products in order to make, I think it's the butter, in order to make the caramels. And now they're going to be maybe making something into an ice cream using the Hum Yum Caramel. It's very, very meta. Dick Taylor Chocolate uses some of their dairy products, and they use some of the chocolate in their stuff, and they sell the chocolate in their store. So it's really fun to see something that's so hyper local, and it's a bright little spot in Lolita. So
I love this. Not only do I love this fresh ice cream experience and bringing all that hyper local love to Lolita, but I miss the creamery. So it kind of, gives me that feeling of getting dairy in Lolita again. And I love that. So Thank you, Jennifer. I love bringing ice cream to our presentation today. And before we run out of time, I want to afford you the opportunity to highlight the one other piece this week that I hope the readers will enjoy as much as I did.
Also edible, possibly less appetizing now that Mike Kelly has written about it. There is a kind of seaweed that you may have seen washed up, as his column is called, on our beaches. And this week in his washed up column, Mike Kelly is taking on sea palms. And how sometimes you see like, oh, there's a little strand of kelp, the Disney shaped kelp, right? The little ribbon of kelp. And then sometimes you see this weird long branch thing with stuff on, like leaves of kelp on top. But then there might be like, is that a rock attached to the bottom? What am I looking at? What element is this? And in fact, sea palms, when they wash up around our shores, sometimes carry with them, they could be mussels, they could be barnacles, all kinds of stuff might get stuck to the bottom because they adhere themselves to rocks. And he described it as like little people waving in the water, like tiny people waving because of the sort of kelp leaves that emerge from the top of the water. And they're this annual kelp plant that grows and then eventually is washed away by waves. And he describes imaginary, just want to say, alleged imaginary crimes that he may have committed. But the one crime he will not commit is the illegal pruning of said kelp. Apparently, in order to go and harvest this edible kelp, you have to have a permit because it's very easy to overcut it and kill off the plant. So even a hardened criminal such as Mike Kelly would never do such a thing without a permit. Are his descriptions of its reproductive system colorful? They are, but that is what you get when you open up a washed up column. And anyways.
That is, I learned so much, and I think all of the readers will also get an education with a side of humor.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I have forgotten most of my high school biology, but I am never going to forget how crabs have sex now. Thank you, Mike Kelly.
Thank you. And thank you, Jennifer and Thad. So that's going to wrap up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick up your copy, or of course you can find it at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Thanks for being with us and staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community.